Hi, everyone. Welcome to our How to Do Research and Get Published webinar. Today, we're going to explore how metrics help researchers gauge the impact and visibility of their scholarly work. We'll discuss popular journal level metrics like impact factor, Scamago, journal rank, and cite score, as well as article level metrics such as citation counts and altmetric. Our goal is to help you better understand how to leverage these metrics to enhance your research impact. But before we get started, I'd like to introduce you to the team. Sam Andrews is an expert in bibliometrics, evaluating quality journals and developing key metrics for journal evaluation. He works as Sage's journal indexing specialist, where he is responsible for oversight and key journal metrics across Sage's portfolio to increase the influence of their journals via key databases. He has also been developing the Practical Journal Insights Project, or PJIP, since 2022, an open access database to help researchers find the top quality journals in their subject area, and completed his PhD in 2024. Jessica Offenberger is a publishing editor on the STM Journal's editorial team. She manages a range of science and medicine journals, working with editors and societies to develop new strategies and problem solve. During her time at Sage, she has worked closely with the author team to create and develop resources to help early career researchers better understand the publishing process and publish their research. We're also joined by Alyssa Venecia, the publishing editor on the STM Journal's editorial team. She oversees a suite of peer-reviewed journals in medical fields and is responsible for the operational oversight and strategic development of those titles. Alyssa also leads our publisher reporting group and journals transmittal processes, in addition to other project management at Sage. And last, I'm Sean Scarsbrick, a senior marketing manager on the author marketing team at Sage. My primary role is to provide support to authors as they move through the publishing process, with a particular focus on providing targeted resources at the right time. As we talk today, please send us your questions via the Q&A chat at the bottom of your screen. We'll answer as many questions as we can live, and if we don't get to them all, we will follow up via blog post. And to get us situated today, I'd like to introduce you to a typical author timeline, moving from the very early stages of securing funding all the way through resubmission. We'll cover this process today, in particular focusing on how to understand journal level and article level metrics. And with that, I'm happy to pass it off to Jessica.
Great. Thank you so much, Sean. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone that has joined us. We're really excited to dive into this topic today. So when considering a journal to publish in, it is key to consider its indexing status. So indexing platforms are curated databases that catalog scholarly content, journals, articles, conference papers, dissertations, all based on subject relevance, quality, and editorial standards. Their primary role is to make research discoverable to scholars, practitioners, and institutions worldwide. Index content is easier to find through academic search engines and library databases. Inclusion in a reputable index signals editorial rigor and research quality. Indexed articles are more likely to be cited as they are visible to a broader audience. Indexed articles are also more likely to appear in search results, increasing readership. Many platforms link to full text sources, making it easier for researchers to cite relevant work, which is why we're here today to talk about these important platforms. It's first worth distinguishing between subject-specific databases and unrestricted databases. Subject-specific databases are databases that focus on a particular academic discipline or field, offering highly curated content relevant to that area. They are ideal for researchers seeking depth and precision within a specific subject. Examples like that include PubMed or Medline for biomedical and life sciences, PsycInfo for psychology, ERIC for education, and MathSciNet for mathematics. These indexes have rigorous inclusion criteria based on subject relevance and scientific quality. They are often maintained by professional societies or government agencies. For instance, PubMed is managed by the U.S. National Library of Medicine. They have high discoverability within the field due to targeting indexing. It's worth noting that these may not include citation metrics. For example, PubMed does not provide citation counts, but it is highly credible and widely used. On the other hand, unrestricted databases, also known as multidisciplinary databases, are databases that index journals across multiple disciplines, offering broad coverage and cross-disciplinary discoverability. Examples include Web of Science, Scopus, and Google Scholar. Scopus covers science, technology, medicine, social sciences, arts, and humanities. Google Scholar, on the other hand, is broad and inclusive, though less curated. All of these indexes are useful for comparative analyses across fields. Um, these unrestricted databases are often more citation focused or metric focused. So, for instance, the Journal Citation Report in Web of Science, CiteScore with Scopus. These are all different citation metrics that we look at. Inclusion often signals editorial and research quality due to the rigorous evaluation processes. So on this slide particularly, we're showing some of the larger abstracting and indexing services that we work with as a publisher. These indexing services offer varying levels of discoverability and metrics. Looking for a reputable index journal is something that you'll want to think about in order to avoid predatory journals and predatory publishers. To start off, Clarivate Analytics, the logo you see here on the left, owns the Web of Science database and the Journal Citation Report. The JCR is updated once a year with impact factors for those journals in the Social Science Citation Index, Science Citation Index Expanded, and the Emerging Sciences Citation Index, as well as the Arts and Humanities Citation Index. All of these citation indexes focus on social science, science, emergent sources, and arts and humanities, as the name implies. They're updated once a year, usually in June, sometimes July, and then reloaded with any corrections in October. Web of Science is continually updated, that database that provides the data for the Journal Citation Report. Researchers that publish in journals that are indexed in these indices, the SSCI, SCIE, ESCI, or HCI, will have citations to their articles recorded so that you can start building their own research metrics profile. The process of getting indexed by Clarivate involves multiple checkpoints on research quality. So being indexed in these indices is a positive indicator for that journal's editorial process. So this is an important thing to look at. PubMed, on the other hand, is a government-run biomedical index, as I mentioned. You can think of PubMed like an umbrella, as you see here on the slide, that contains both Medline and PubMed Central, or PMC, although these are separate indices from each other. Medline is hosted exclusively on PubMed, and PMC content is hosted on a separate site and fed through to PubMed for hosting there as well. PubMed does not provide citation metrics because it is free and highly credible indexing database. It's really a go-to place for biomedical researchers to find articles. Because of this, it offers high discoverability for these journals and authors that have content indexed in it. PubMed has a very rigorous scientific and ethical quality review for all journals applying to be indexed in either PMC or Medline. So again, this is a positive indicator of a journal's scientific quality and integrity to be indexed in PubMed. Medline, under this umbrella, is the older index associated with PubMed. It is highly selective. Medline will index articles when they are published online ahead of print, but only ever lists the abstracts, not the full text of the article. PMC is a more recent addition to the PubMed portfolio and was created when open access started to become a more popular publication model. Unlike most abstracting and indexing, or ANI services, as you'll hear us talk about today, PMC allows viewers to read the full text version of an article that is indexed there. These articles can be placed under an embargo of up to 12 months, depending on the agreement. For researchers publishing government-funded research, there is often a mandate to make that content available in its accepted pre-publication format. If you're publishing in a journal that is indexed by PMC, this will be done for you automatically. If you're publishing in a journal that is not in PMC, though, you will have to manually upload your manuscript through the NIHMS portal. It's a relatively simple process. Moving forward to Scopus. Like Clarivate, Scopus indexes content in a database and also produces annual metrics reports. The site score is produced by Scopus, and the SCImago score is based on Scopus data. Scopus does review journals for the presence of ethical policies and clearly stated peer review processes, so another good database to look at. The DOAJ, or the Directory of Open Access Journals, indexes only open access journals exclusively and has an excellent review and screening process for journals applying to be indexed. So if you're looking for a safe OA journal to publish in, indexing in the DOAJ is a very positive indicator of that journal's legitimacy. Moving on to a number of other indexing platforms that I wanted to briefly mention. There's a few I want to highlight here. EBSCO is a full-text multidisciplinary aggregator and indexer with over 375 full-text databases. It offers both paid and free databases, including those for theses, dissertations, and teacher resources. The discoverability is moderate to high as it is widely used in academic libraries, so you might be using it already in your own institution. EBSCO indirectly supports citation growth by increasing access and visibility. ProQuest similarly aggregates dissertations, theses, journals, and gray literature, all of which is full text. It is known for its comprehensive coverage of social sciences and humanities. Discoverability is high, especially for dissertations and historical content. ProQuest enhances long-tail discoverability, especially for early stage or niche research. ERIC stands for the Education Resources Information Center. ERIC is the U.S. Department of Education sponsored index for education literature. It covers journal articles, policy papers, curriculum, guides, and more. Discoverability is high within the education field. So if this is your subject area, highly recommend looking into ERIC if you're not familiar with it already. It includes a robust source for searching. ERIC is also especially valuable for education researchers and policy influencers. It's a great and trusted resource for education researchers and can also be used as a repository for government-funded research. PsycInfo is managed by the American Psychological Association and focuses on psychology and behavioral sciences. It offers abstracts and citations with links to the full text on publishers' sites. Discoverability is high, again, within the psychology field and is really considered a gold standard for psychological indexing. The citation impact is strong due to its targeted audience and integration with APA resources. Google Scholar is a broad multidisciplinary database, and it's inclusive of great literature. It is free and widely acceptable, as well as indexes across disciplines and formats. Discoverability is very high, but as I mentioned earlier, it's a little less curated than other platforms. Google Scholar does offer citation metrics like the H-index and the I-10 index, and it's useful for tracking broader impact. Some other indices worth including and mentioning include the DBLP, focused on computer sciences, InSpec for engineering, PhilPapers for philosophy, EconLit for economics, ZBMath for mathematics, Agricola for agriculture, and CABI for public health. So now that we've covered a lot of the main indexes, let's compare the significance of journal level and article level metrics to better understand their unique roles in assessing research impact, the whole reason we're here today. Journal level metrics such as the impact factor, SCImago, journal rank, or the SJR, and site score help assess the prestige and influence of the publication outlet itself. These metrics are valuable when deciding where to publish your research. So journals with higher metrics often attract more readers and have a larger academic audience, which can result in increased exposure for your work. However, they have limitations like anything else. They measure the journal's reputation as a whole, not necessarily the quality or impact of individual articles. Remember, it's about finding the right home and readership for your research, as we talk about in our other webinars on how to select a journal. Article level metrics, on the other hand, focus on impact and visibility of your specific research paper. Metrics like citations, alt metrics, and download counts give us insights into how widely and how quickly an individual article is being noticed and used within the research community and beyond. So these metrics offer a more nuanced view of a researcher's impact, allowing you to gauge the societal and academic influence of a specific paper. However, article level metrics can also have their drawbacks. Some metrics, like citation counts, can be skewed by a few high profile articles, while others, like alt metrics, may reflect short term engagement that doesn't always lead to lasting academic impact. But both these metrics have their place in evaluating research impact. Journal level metrics give insight to the prestige of the outlet, while article level metrics focus on the impact of individual articles. So it's important to consider both metrics and understand each type of metric and how to interpret them to really assess the true impact of your scholarly work. So to reflect a little bit further, traditional citation-based metrics like impact factor and H-index focus on scholarly citations, which take time to accumulate. Alternative metrics such as altmetric, attention scores, Plumex, and Mendeley readers capture engagement beyond academia, including media mentions, social shares, and policy citations. This can create and indicate real-world influence, but may be somewhat influenced by social trends and media coverage. Also, different disciplines have varying citation behaviors. For instance, medicine and physics tend to have higher citation counts due to large-scale collaborations, while humanities and social sciences often see fewer citations over longer periods. Metrics like SNP, source normalized impact per paper, help account for these differences, making it easier to compare impact across fields. So as you know, these metrics influence academic promotions, funding decision, and journal selection. So we want to take all of this into account. While impact factor is often used to determine journal prestige, it's important to consider article level metrics to assess the reach and influence of individual works. A balanced approach, combining both traditional and emerging metrics, provides a more comprehensive view of an academic journal and the academic impact. There is an increasing emphasis on responsible research evaluation as reflected in initiatives like the Declaration on Research Assessment and the Leiden Manifesto. These frameworks encourage a more nuanced approach to evaluating research, focusing on qualitative aspects rather than relying solely on citation counts. The Declaration on Research Assessment, or DORA, is a global initiative that launched in 2012 at the annual meeting of the American Society for Cell Biology in San Francisco. This initiative was created to address the widespread misuse of journal-based metrics, particularly the Journal Impact Factor, or JIF, in evaluating the quality and impact of scholarly research. DORA advocates for a more holistic and responsible approach to research assessment. It emphasizes evaluating research on its own metrics rather than relying on the prestige of a journal in which it's published. It also recognizes a broader range of research outputs like data sets, software, policy briefs, and encourages the use of article level metrics such as downloads, citations, and alternative metrics or alt metrics to better reflect the reach and influence of individual works. In practice, DORA's principles help shift the focus from where research is published to what research actually contributes. This shift is really crucial in fostering equity in social communication, supporting early career researchers, and promoting innovation across disciplines. SAGE is one of the signatories of DORA. Ultimately, as we'll talk about today, no single metric is perfect. The key is to understand their strengths and limitations, and use them collectively to assess and enhance your research visibility. So let's dive into some of these journal metrics. Over to you, Sam.
Thank you, Jessica. So in this section, I'm going to provide an overview of some of the more prominent journal level metrics. These are metrics that aim to assess the influence and impact of academic journals. They help researchers identify reputable publication venues, gauge the reach of their work, and are widely used in academic evaluations and funding decisions. However, I think it's important to understand their strengths and their limitations to use them effectively. So let's start with one of the most widely recognized journal metrics, the impact factor. Now, it's calculated by dividing the number of citations received by a journal's articles over the past 2 years by the total number of articles published in that same period. It's designed to measure the citation impact of content recently published by the journal. And as of the 2023 release of the JCR, all journals in the Web of Science's core collection receive an impact factor. Although widely used, the impact factor is just one measure among many to take into consideration when selecting a journal. Just because you publish in a journal with a high impact factor does not mean that your research will be highly cited. A journal can have a very high impact factor, but still publish many papers that go on to receive no citations. Plus, not all research will be cited right away. It may take time for citations to accrue, and any citations arriving beyond the 2-year time frame have no influence on the impact factor. So given the impact factor's limited time frame, I think it's worth considering other metrics that follow a similar structure but use different time periods. So this includes Elsevier's Cite Score, which is calculated over 4 years, impact per publication, which is calculated over 3 years, and the 5-year impact factor, which perhaps unsurprisingly is calculated over 5 years. So journals in fields where citations tend to accrue quickly, so such as the sciences, they tend to perform better on metrics with shorter timeframes. In contrast, journals in fields where citations accrue at a slower pace, so such as the humanities, tend to do better on metrics that use longer timeframes. It's also important to note that different metrics include different types of documents. So for example, Clarivate only counts articles and reviews as citable items, whereas Elsevier includes conference papers, book chapters, and data papers. This means that the document count and the denominator value that's used in this metrics calculation can vary depending on which index the metric is based on. But ultimately, there are only modest differences between these metrics. They're all based on the same core idea of dividing citation numbers by article numbers. So other metrics go beyond a simple division of citations by papers. A good example of this is the SJR, which is based off of Scopus data. The SJR assigns more weight to citations from prestigious journals. This means that a citation from a well-regarded source carries more value than one from a lesser-known venue. As a result, a journal could receive many citations but have a low SJR if those citations come from less influential places. Conversely, a journal could receive fewer citations but have a high SJR if those citations come from prestigious journals. Now, I think it's really worth noting that prestige is being determined solely by citation data. So it's not the journal's reputation, their longevity, the editor's academic reputation in its field. It's just citations. And this approach tends to favor long-established journals over newer ones, and the SJR has drawn some criticism for this. That said, the SJR does account for self-citations, so it's less prone to manipulation in certain respects. Other metrics attempt to adjust for differences in citation behavior across academic disciplines. So some fields publish and cite far more frequently than others, which makes direct comparisons between them impractical. Source normalized metrics adjust citation ratings to make cross-disciplinary comparisons more meaningful. So an example of such metrics include the SNIP from the Center for Science and Technology Studies, Clarivate's Journal Citation Indicator, and the Field Citation Ratio, which is accessible via Dimensions. While these metrics provide a more level playing field, their value depends on accurate field categorization. So if the subject categories are too broad or not sufficiently nuanced, their metrics may fail to reflect meaningful differences in citation practices, and the citation weightings may not correctly represent the norms of each field. And the last metrics I'll cover here are the H5 index and H5 median from Google Scholar. These are intended to measure a journal's productivity and citation impact over the past 5 years. The H5 index is the number H, such that H articles published in the last 5 years have received at least H citations. And the H5 median is just the median citation count for articles included in the H5 index. And most journals included in Google Scholar have these metrics, but there are some basic journal requirements. So for instance, a journal must have published at least 100 articles in the past 5 years. Google Scholar's metrics have the advantage of including a broader range of documents and document types than other databases. So for example, doctoral theses and preprints are included. However, unlike Clarivate or Scopus, Google Scholar does not assess the quality of journals it indexes. And as a result, content from less reputable sources can influence these metrics and potentially distort their credibility. And that's where I'm going to leave this discussion on journal level metrics and hand over to Alyssa to talk about article level metrics.
Thanks, Sam. So now that we've all learned a bit about the journal level metrics that can help authors determine where to submit their manuscripts, I'll be covering some key article level metrics. And these focus more on the impact and visibility of a specific paper, which allow you to gauge the societal and academic influence of an article or researcher. So first up are downloads and citations, which are two of the most well-known article level metrics that are available. A download or view count tracks how often an article is accessed or downloaded, and these numbers reflect the visibility and interest in the research, especially for open access publications, which tend to have higher download rates. However, they don't necessarily correlate with academic impact, as high download numbers don't guarantee high citations. A citation count refers to the number of times a particular research article, book, or other scholarly work has been cited by other academic publications. It serves as a key indicator of a work's academic influence and impact within that field. The more citations an article receives, the more it is considered to have contributed to ongoing research discussions. And citations are tracked through various academic databases and indexing services, which you've heard a bit about now, and they compile and analyze references from these published works. Some of the most widely used citation tracking platforms that are available include the Web of Science, Scopus, Google Scholar, Crossref, and other DOI-based tracking, and also institutional repositories and subject-specific databases. Each of these platforms uses indexing algorithms to detect citations by scanning references within published papers, books, and reports. But it's worth noting that citation counts can vary across these databases due to differences in their coverage, indexing speed, and the source inclusion criteria that each has. I also want to highlight that Sage makes download and citation metrics available on every individual article on our website. When you're on an article page in the menu, click on the metrics and citations option, and you can always access this data. And then next, I want to look at altmetrics, which is short for alternative metrics. These go beyond traditional citations to measure online engagement, including things like mentions in social media, blog posts, and news articles. They provide a more comprehensive view of a research article's societal impact, but they can be influenced by media trends, which makes them a little less stable for academic evaluation. Altmetrics measure online attention and engagement, which typically peaks immediately after publication and then tapers off. They also reflect the societal impact and public interest of an article, so it's a nice complement to those traditional citation and download-based metrics. A strength of altmetrics is that they capture non-academic impact and real-time attention on an article, but a limitation is that they may be influenced by hype or media coverage trends. Moving on now to look at the H-index. It's commonly used at the author level to identify an individual researcher's productivity and citation impact, and it's calculated as follows. So if a researcher has an H-index of H, that means that they have H papers that have been cited at least H times. So to put that more in terms of real numbers, if a researcher has an H-index of 10, it means that the author has 10 publications that have been cited at least 10 times each. Some strengths of the H-index is that it combines productivity, meaning the number of publications, with impact, meaning the number of citations. It also minimizes the impact of having very few highly cited papers or a large number of lower cited papers. Some limitations is that it does not account for the number of co-authors on an article, so it can potentially inflate the H-index for more highly collaborative fields. It's also very field dependent, so citation practices can vary across disciplines, so you get very different H-indexes. And it's also a lifetime measure, which means it favors senior researchers with longer publication histories. So there's some things to be aware of with that. And then I want to highlight Sage Policy Profiles, which has helped thousands of global researchers discover and track where their work is being cited in policy documents. It's also the only free-to-use tool that does so. The tool is user-friendly. It has a dashboard that allows users to export data, visualization, and slides that showcase the impact of their work. It's powered by Overton, which is the world's largest searchable index of policy documents. And since its launch, Overton and Sage have added over 6.8 million data points from 193 countries, and we're adding more every month. So anytime you go back to check it, you may see more of these citations and where your work has been cited in actual policy. Sage and many other publishers are dedicated to evolving our understanding of research impact from one that centers on the scholarly impact to one that enables and celebrates research that benefits policy practice and the public. So we know we can play an important role here as an independent publisher, and we're committed to that goal long term. As noted earlier in the presentation, Sage has signed on to DORA, and we know that isn't quite enough. So this is Sage Policy Profiles is the most recent offering from Sage to help us expand that research impact assessment. And then as research metrics evolve, new trends are shaping how we assess the impact and visibility of scholarly work. One key development is the shift towards open science initiatives, where transparency in research outputs and data sharing are emphasized. So open access publishing and preprints have made research more widely available, and that affects how impact is measured beyond our traditional metrics. Another major trend is increased transparency in metric calculation. So many institutions and publishers are working to ensure that impact metrics are clear, reproducible, and free from manipulation. And this helps researchers better understand what these numbers truly represent. There's also growing awareness of the limitations and biases in indexing or existing metrics. Traditional citation-based measures often favor well-established researchers and institutions and potentially disadvantage early career scholars and those from underrepresented regions. So alternative metrics like altmetric and other engagement metrics are gaining traction to provide a more holistic view of research influence. And finally, as we talked about, there is an increasing emphasis on responsible research evaluation as reflected in initiatives like DORA. And these frameworks encourage a more nuanced approach to evaluating research, focusing on qualitative aspects rather than relying solely on citation counts. And together, these trends signal a broader, more inclusive and fairer approach to measuring academic impact. And now that we've covered various metrics, let's discuss some practical strategies for maximizing your research visibility and impact. The first thing is to make sure you're choosing the right journal. So before you submit your work, evaluate the journal's impact factor, site score, and other metrics to ensure it aligns with your research goals. Consider whether it has a strong readership in your fields. You can look at all the various indexes we talked about today. Also, maybe your funder or institution has requirements on where you should submit that you need to consider. If so, we have a great webinar on that topic. When selecting a journal for publication or evaluating its reach and credibility, subject-specific databases also offer depth and field-specific visibility. Unrestricted databases offer broader exposure and citation tracking across disciplines. So for example, being in PubMed is a strong indicator of scientific rigor in biomedical fields. And then inclusion in Web of Science or Scopus enhances the journal visibility. You can also engage in open science. So sharing preprints, data sets, or code can increase the visibility and credibility of your work. Another thing to consider is using persistent identifiers. One example is to register for an ORCID ID to ensure that your publications are correctly attributed to you. And that can help improve your citation tracking and your overall research profile. Please also be sure to promote your work, actively sharing your research in academic networks and on social media platforms like X, Blue Sky, and LinkedIn. Really helps engage in discussions around in your field around the exposure and citations to your work. You can also monitor your metrics. So keep track of your citation counts, alt metrics, downloads on your article using tools that we've discussed today. And that can help understand how your research is being received and help you refine from there. And then also diversify your impact measurements. Don't rely solely on one metric. Consider a combination of journal and article level metrics to get a complete picture of your research influence. And then by applying these strategies, you can enhance your research visibility, increase engagement, and improve your chances of making a meaningful impact in your fields. And then I'm going to hand it over to Sean to wrap us up today.
Thank you very much. So we're going to go into a Q&A portion of today's call in just a minute, but before we do so, I wanted to flag a few things that we have available to all of you. So as you're joining us for our webinar series, we have a bunch planned that are continuing for the rest of the year. We have one in about 2 weeks on how to get published in a special collection or issue, one later in August on how to write a research grant, one on ethics and research integrity, and for anybody here who conducts clinical research in September, we have a specific webinar on that. So definitely tune into those, and of course, go back to watch any recordings that may be applicable. We have our Sage Informations for Authors hub, where we've got a host of information for you available, information on how to get published, and where you can learn where your paper is, where you can share it, all of these basic things that you might be looking for. I also would like to plug our author newsletter. This is a new initiative that will be going out quarterly. You'll have free access to academic publishing resources, and you'll be the first to know about upcoming webinars like this. The next one we'll send in about 3 months. As I said, it's quarterly, but I'll leave this up on the screen here for anybody who is interested and who would like to sign up for it. I'll leave this up as we start talking and moving into the Q&A. So continue to send any questions you've got to us through the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. But my first question for my panelists, can you explain the difference between ESCI and SCIE? What are the benefits for each of them?
I can start us off and someone else can weigh in. So ESCI stands for the Emerging Sources Citation Index, and SCIE is the Science Citation Index expanded. So these are just two different indexes within the Web of Science. The one is it more so has to do with ESCI has been a starting point for journals to get indexed. So they display scientific quality, scientific rigor, and have passed all the benchmarks that Clarivate has set for evaluation, but they may not be as high impact or high ranking in their field as what you might see in the SCIE or SSCI indexes. So I don't like using the term better. I think that if you're looking purely at rankings and numbers, yes, those journals in SCIE and SSCI have higher rankings, but both ESCI, SCIE, and SSCI have relevance to journals and their field, right? Just because a journal may not be an SSCI doesn't mean it's not important. Maybe it's more niche. Maybe it's more of a clinician focus or practitioner focused. Maybe it's a field that takes longer to accrue citations. So the impact factor only looks at that 2-year period with citations in a given year. So those citations might take longer to accrue and you may not see it in the journal impact factor. So I think it goes back to focusing on who is your readership? What are you trying to research? What are you trying to share with your community? What discipline are you focused on? And And as we've been talking about in this webinar, focusing on that holistic approach, not necessarily one specific metric, ESCI versus SCIE. Alyssa or Sam, anything that you might want to add or expand upon?
I mean, I'll briefly expand on it, I guess, because it's not just the SCIE. The Clarivate sort of groups together all of their, I want to say, their high impact journals into these indexes. They call them the flagship ones, and journals move between the SCI and these flagship journals. It used to be that if a journal was Q1 or Q2 in their subject category, that they moved up to the flagship index. That's actually been on hold since 2022. They haven't been making any moves between the indexes. And it's not entirely clear what that process is going to look like when it comes back. But generally, the differences are these were Q1 and Q2 journals, and that's where they've been put into these different indexes.
Great, thank you both. I have an interesting question here. Someone's asking why there is a difference in article metrics from the Web of Science versus Google Scholar. Wonder if you could break that down.
Yeah, I can start us off here. So the different citation databases have different inclusion criteria. So actually journals that are indexed in Web of Science have applied for that and been accepted. They've passed for the JCR, they've passed certain quality metrics in order to get indexed by Clarivate. So that's looking usually at a smaller pool of journals and where articles have been cited within those other journals. Whereas like something like Google Scholar is very broad and is going to look at a much larger scope of journals that are publishing. So you usually see a higher citation count with Google Scholar than you would with Web of Science.
Thanks, Alyssa. Sam, Jessica, are we happy with that? Nothing else? Perfect. We've got another question here. When looking at a citation score or an impact factor, how is it evaluated to ensure that it's from quality research and not from anything unethical or potentially with bias?
I can start us off with that one if you'd like. So that's a great question and a very important one. Citation scores and impact factors are widely used to measure influence, but they do not inherently guarantee that the underlying research is ethical, high quality, or free of bias. So it's we hope that that is all there when a paper undergoes peer review, but peer reviewers are human. So the citation metrics do not assess the research quality, reproducibility, ethical integrity, peer review rigor, conflict of interest, or biased. It's possible that a highly cited paper could be methodologically flawed, cited in criticism, or published in potential predatory or low quality journals that still gets citations. But citation scores are supplemented by the peer review process. The peer review process will hopefully filter out flawed or unethical work. Peer review, as we know, varies across journals. So thinking back on to how to select a journal, transparency is key. Looking in the manuscript submission guidelines for key indicators on the peer review process, what type of process they use, how they disclose any potential conflicts of interest. Looking at the guidelines there will be crucial. We talk about journal editorial standards. We'll be looking to see if a journal is a member in COPE. SAGE journals are part of COPE, the Committee on Publication Ethics. Again, looking at the guidelines, adherence to ICMJE or Equator reporting guidelines. And then going back to our topic today, right, indexing criteria, journals must meet technical and editorial quality standards, and ethical standards are considered. But again, it's based on how they're enforced. And then that post-publication review, right? We have a research integrity team here that is continually helping our journals, editors, and teams navigate that post-publication process if there's any corrections, retractions, and public critique around that. So we look to peer reviewers and journal editors to really maintain that high quality even after a journal is indexed. So looking at the journal policies, peer review transparency, open science practices, the reputation of authors and institutions. We have some great webinars on these topics in our webinar library, which I encourage you to check out. And especially as we're getting ready for our 2026, releasing our 2026 schedule. Alyssa and Sam, not to put you on the spot, is there anything you want to add about this?
I think the only thing I would add is that Clarivate, which puts out the journal citation reports, this year they have announced that they've stopped counting citations to retracted articles in the impact factor. It's worth noting it often takes a long time to retract an article. We might not even be aware, or publishers might not be aware that an article needs to be retracted for many years after it's published. So might not change impact factors too much, but if a journal has a recently published article that has been retracted, those citations will no longer benefit its impact factor.
The only thing I wanted to add was to give a shout out to the research integrity team at Sage, which you've already beat me to, Jessica. So
Yes, thank you. And they're frequent guests on our webinar series, so we love working with research integrity.
Well, research integrity is such an integral part of what we do, and it's the platform on which academic publishing is based. So it's something that we're continually talking about, and it ties into that overall bigger picture on how to publish quality work.
For sure, thank you. We've got another question here. Are there any benchmark tables to show what the median or average citations or impact factor for a specific discipline? This would be very helpful to determine whether the impact factor is average or good for a potential submission. Do you have any thoughts on this?
I mean, I'll go for this one if that's all right. I think when you're looking at quartiles, they're already broken down into subject specific. So if you go and look in the Web of Science and you see a journal is Q1 or they're in the top 10 percentile, it's of a subject. So the impact factor as a number might not have any meaning relative to the subject, but the quartiles and the percentiles do. So if you're trying to find the median average numbers, you'd look at the end of Q2 and you'd see what's in the middle. Obviously, Q1's the good journals. Everything below is below average. I think that pretty much covers it. It's quartiles are subject relative.
Can I actually ask, can you explain a little bit more about what the quartiles are? I see a lot of questions coming through here about that.
Yeah, sure. So this is the same across Scopus as well, because I saw there was another question about that. So you'll get a number, it'll be an impact factor, it'll be a site score, and then each of the journals are grouped into subjects and they're ranked. So you get the journals at the top of the subject, they've got the highest impact factor or site score, and then they go down to those with the lowest ones. That group of journals is then split into 4 different categories. You've got the top 25%, the next 25%, and then Q3, Q4. So that's your 4 quartiles. Obviously, that's relative to each subject. So Q1 journals are the best in their subjects, Q4 journals are the worst in their subject, based on the impact metric that's being measured.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for breaking that down. Yeah, I see lots of questions about that. So I hope that's answered everybody's questions there. Another question about open access publishing. Very curious about the impact if you publish open access. What is the impact this could have on your citation index? Is there a major difference between that and publishing in a hybrid journal? What are your thoughts generally?
So I can start us out if you'd like. I think if you look at various studies, studies will show that citations on average tend to be higher for an open access publication. But I say that with some hesitation, because if it's not the right, you want to focus on the readership, right? How you want to focus on the discoverability, what are key phrases that people are searching for. If it's still not published in the right home, or it's lacking some of those elements of discoverability, even if it's open access, it still might not be discovered. So, and there's also ways for people to find your research in hybrid or subscription journals. Publishing in a hybrid or subscription journal doesn't mean that it's bad or worse or not the right home. It's about focusing on that high quality research, focusing on the research question at hand, strong methodology, thinking about the target audience again, like we've been emphasizing. And then there you can share. We have a couple of great webinars on promoting your research and how to disseminate that research more widely, as well as a great number of resources on our Sage Author Gateway. So it's about getting it out. So that answers your question partially with some caveats on focusing on the dissemination and that reach. Sam or Alyssa, if you want to chime in, anything you want to add?
Thanks, Jessica. I'll chime in to say that your article is never done when you publish. You have to continue the promotion work. It's always important to do so. Another question here. People have been asking, how do you increase your citations and how do you increase potentially your H-index? I saw somebody wrote that they published a lot but haven't seen a true impact in their H-index. Are there any tips for that?
I can start here. Some of it was already mentioned in the prior question, but yeah, it kind of goes through the entire publication process from like choosing what journal you're going to submit to and ideally be accepted and publish in, all the way through to promoting your article. So, you want to look for journals that are going to reach your audience. And so, like, considering your research topic, who do you want to be reading that information? Whose research is it going to help in the future that might cite it in their next article? And look for journals that focus on that discipline and submit there. So, sometimes being more specialized of a journal can help increase those citations. Sometimes being a broader journal can help. It just depends on your topic. And then once the article is published, you want to make sure that you're promoting it. So you can use social media to do that. You can share it with your academic network, people that you know are working on similar research. Make sure that they're aware that you've published this and that you're really putting it out there to be picked up. And that will help also. And then also it's a question of time. So as mentioned earlier when talking about the H-index, it does favor people who have been publishing for a very long time. They've had more time to accrue those citations. And often articles are not cited in the first year or two after they've been published. It can take several years for, the next study to come out that advances the field. So that also has an impact. Sam, Jessica, anything to add?
I think on a brief thing that there's studies that have been done that show that co-authored papers, when you've got, I think it's something like 4 or 5 co-authors on your paper, it gets more citations. So maybe that's a really blunt way of trying to increase your impact metrics. Co-author more papers.
Absolutely. Collaborations, those are really enhance the reach, right? If you share your paper and research with 10 people and then all of your co-authors are sharing that within their network, that just broadens that reach exponentially each time. Get in touch with your institution, or if you're part of an academic association or a society, can they help send out a press release? Or I saw some questions around media mentions. Getting in touch with press. You could look at including a plain language summary or key takeaways. This would be following the abstract section of the journal article and would be, if it's in a hybrid journal, not behind the paywall. So publishing plain language summaries can be a great way to get access to a new audience and have people pick up things that might be interested. Here at Sage, we offer authors the option to write a Sage Perspectives blog to enhance the visibility of their work. So Sam, I love that idea. I wanted to piggyback on the co-author collaboration. There's actually a great webinar we ran last year, I believe, on conferences and networking. That's a good webinar to watch on, how can you increase your network and how can you increase these collaborations within your discipline and cross-disciplinary research, because sometimes it's hard to figure out a place to get started in making these connections if you do want to publish with co-authors. So I recommend checking out that webinar as well.
Thank you, Jessica. And that's a great plug for our other webinars. We, as Jessica mentioned, we have a huge repository of previously recorded ones and then also lots of upcoming ones. So we hope to see you all there. We've had so many good questions, but I think now it's our time to wrap it up. So I want to say a huge thank you to our panelists, to Alyssa, Jessica, and Sam. We appreciate all of your expert insights, and I hope that all of our audience appreciated it too. Just so everybody who is joining us live knows, we will send an email in the next week or two with a link to today's recording, the slides, and also a certificate of attendance. Now, we appreciate you coming and hope to see you in a future webinar. But in the meantime, please take care.